Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for joining this quarterly Michigan Alliance for Grading Mobility Advanced Council meeting. My name is Amanda Bauerschmidt. I am a Workforce Project Manager at the Workforce Intelligence Network and a co-convener for the MAGMA Governing Board, which is comprised of automotive, OEMs, manufacturing, Tier 1 suppliers, and industry stakeholder groups. MAGMA is leading the recently awarded State of Michigan Sector Strategies Michigan Revolution for Electrification of Vehicles Employer-Led Collaborative, which was recently renamed by the State of Michigan to Michigan Revolution for Electrification of Vehicles Jobs Academy. On behalf of the MAGMA Governing Board, I'd like to thank and welcome our panelist speakers and moderator on this topic of defense for EV and mobility. Our esteemed moderator is Matt, Executive Director of the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, AMC, a successor organization to the Obama administration's IMCP Economic Development Initiative focused on bottom-up efforts advancing American manufacturing. As a thought leader, he is the host of What's America's Purpose podcast, the co-founder of the for-benefit enterprise Fourth Sector Group, and has taught sustainability law at the University of California, Davis Law School, where he serves on the board of California Environmental Law and Policy Center. As a consumer environmental prosecutor and then policy official at both the California EPA and the US EPA in Washington, D.C., Matt led numerous initiatives and taught at the Georgetown University Law Center. He began his service as a U.S. Navy Corps officer, where he earned the Joint Service Commendation Medal, in part for his work in the international law. In business, he was a law firm business builder and later the Chief Sustainability Officer for REV, a sustainability services startup. Thank you for being with us again, Matt. Please lead us through this important conversation by introducing our next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be moderating this discussion today. As you heard, I'm Executive Director of AMCC, and it's an organization of regional and national stakeholders dedicated to strengthening American manufacturing, what you guys are doing here today. We do this at AMCC by encouraging the formation of designated manufacturing communities through federal designation programs, and there are many of them and growing. Michigan's been a part of these designated manufacturing community programs. IMCP, the DoD's Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, EDA's Build Back Better Regional Challenge, DOE's LEAP program, the National Science Foundation's Engines program, and the pending Tech Hub program in Congress right now. As most of you know, manufacturing, if it's going to thrive and produce critical products on a complex playing field, we need collaboration, and that's key here. And this today's session is an example of that. It's complex work, but we're not intimidated by the complexity. There are many factors that are critical for a thriving manufacturing ecosystem. We call those areas the big six, and it starts with workforce and goes all the way through operational improvements and capital access. I'm just putting that in the chat. It's a link to the big six, and in that it talk about just not making anything to strengthen America's manufacturing cornerstone, but strengthening critical industries. And at that site is identified 6 critical industries for America to thrive. 2 of them we're going to be talking about today. Defense and transportation, and all 6 are important if we're going to thrive in the 21st century. And so, we need to frame the critical issues and then bring in experts to be able to speak to those. And fortunately, at this panel, we have those experts today. And I'm going to introduce all 3 of them right now, and then we're going to hear about 20-minute presentations from each. And then we'll go to some Q&A. And so if you have questions along the way, if you just put those in the chat, and Amanda and I will collect those, and we'll try to get at as many as we can at the end of the presentations. So let me quickly introduce each of our speakers first. First off, we're going to have Vicky Rowinski, Planning and Economic Director for Macomb County, the 3rd largest county in Michigan. She supports 5 distinct program areas, from community planning, economic development, to GIS data services, parks and natural resources, and marketing. Prior to joining, Vicki worked in economic development in the Detroit Regional Chamber and counseled businesses at Macomb Regional Procurement Technical Assistance Center. She is a graduate from several universities, Baker College, Central Michigan, and George Washington University, with degrees from all 3. She serves on several boards, including Greater Detroit Free Trade Zone, Mich Auto, Macomb County Robotics Collaboration and Innovation Center, the Michigan chapter of Women in Defense, and Michigan Automotive Defense Cyber Awareness Team. Involved in many other activities in Macomb County, and I just want to say welcome to you, Vicki. Next up, we're going to have Andrew Dallas. Andrew Dallas is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Advanced Mobility Consortium. Andy comes to NAMC. I think that's how you pronounce it, Andy. Is that right? Yeah, NAMC. Following a long and distinguished career in DoD science and technology community. In addition to his work with NAMC, Andy currently serves as a consultant to the Michigan Defense Center. Prior to that, he is president of small startups, SOAR Automotive, working to bring human-like driving capabilities to self-driving vehicles, and served as VP of Unmanned Platforms at SOAR Technology. Before that, Andy was VP of Saffron Technology, a spin out of IBM Research, provided machine learning solutions to the National Intelligence Committee. He's the founding member of the Robotics Technology Consortium. Let's see, wow, what did you see? Let's see, led the development and transition of robotics research into the Department of Defense, has been a senior consultant at the state of Michigan's 21st Century Job Fund, and held positions at the Office of Naval Research, where he was assigned to DARPA as a program manager. On behalf of my Navy colleagues, Andy, thank you for your service. He has quite a distinguished background there. Thank you. The last speaker is Jeff Simek, who is held a whole host of positions. Program manager at Advanced Manufacturing Engineering, Greenfield Launch Manager and Plant Manager for large Tier 1 companies. He was then came into RCO Engineering as the business unit manager for the Automotive Plastics Division, and after a while became general manager of RCO Aerospace, helping passenger seating and interior products for large cabin purpose-built jets. Today, Jeff leads both aerospace and automotive operations at RCO, and is leading on the 4th Industrial Revolution activities. Jeff's years in aerospace has made him a pioneer, generating pathways for automotive and aerospace technology convergence. He's on the board for AIAM, where he works to ensure Michigan's aerospace industry is aligned to local and global opportunities. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you.
So now let's turn in that order to each of our distinguished panelists. So Vicki, let me go to you, and looking forward to your presentation. Again, if you folks have questions along the way, please put them in chat. Vicki?
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. I know Amanda's going to put up my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Amanda. All right, as mentioned, I am the director for Macomb County Planning and Economic Development. Actually going on 9 years now at the county. Really came into the county with a really good understanding of the defense footprint in not just Macomb County, but the entire state of Michigan. And a lot of that has played into my role in economic development. We can go on to the next slide, Amanda. And you can skip over this one. All right, so I thought maybe perhaps today what I can do is give you kind of just an overview of what we're seeing here within our county. But a lot of the data that I will be sharing can really be perpetuated at a statewide level. I will tell you that our state is doing phenomenal in both major industries, both in aerospace and defense. Really what it comes down to is people and technology. And when we look at the theme of today's topic, you hear a lot of that resonate. From our perspective, when we crunch numbers, I've got a phenomenal team back in the office that loves data. I know a lot of the people on this call also maybe appreciate these numbers, but this really significant for us, what the major job growth targeted industries, why this industry is important to the state of Michigan, but then also for national security. And there's a lot of tie into what we see in aerospace and defense, and then what we're also seeing at the pace of automotive and changes and transitions in technology. For us, it's a major growth industry. You'll see that job growth, that 140% job growth within the last 10 years. That's significant for economic impact. When we look at economic prosperity and the types of jobs that are created within this specific industry, those high wage earners, over 6 figures, is pretty significant. Typically what's tied to that is some type of college degree, whether it's a bachelor's degree, master's, even as far as a PhD. But we're also seeing within skilled trades, sometimes it's a certificate, a program that can get individuals skilled and available, ready for that workforce. We'll go on to the next slide. So within our world, I don't know if you guys have heard this terminology called location quotient, but in the world of economic development, this is pretty significant. The location quotient, actually, I'll do some quick math for you guys on a Friday morning, but it's a ratio. What it looks at is specific job numbers. How many jobs do you have specific to a job skill? And then what does it look like overall? And then how does that compare to other regions or other MSAs throughout the country? In Macomb County, we have really strong location quotients. Anything above the number 1 really signifies density, that you've got a lot of individuals that are within that specific job field. For example, we're at 7.9% in that very first category, that military armored vehicle, tank, and tank component manufacturing, followed by engineering services. When we're looking at, our ecosystem, the types of businesses that make up our industries. This is great for expansion, but it is also great for when we're trying to bring in new businesses into our region. What they want to be able to find is that workforce. And so it's important that we continue to see these great numbers as far as that location quotient. For us, this is something that we should be screaming on the rooftops that, we've got density, we've got concentration. It's pretty strong in Macomb County, but like I said, if we ran these numbers for the entire state, I would think we would see very similar numbers. And when we look at the top occupations, really kind of drilling down to what are the jobs and the job titles that are affiliated with that job. You can see mechanical engineers is pretty strong, software development. And this is when we talk about this new economy. Typically Macomb County was known as a blue collar economy, that, we make things, we manufacture things. But I will tell you that is actually not the case. About 60% of our industries are in that professional services category. And only about 24% is actually in manufacturing. So we've made that shift. In the county, we call it our new collar. And it's that blend of both engineering specialties as well as being able to make things. And we see that with that comes those greater paychecks, that workforce component. But also how the jobs are changing and shifting to meet the needs of the technology that's rolling out. Another pretty significant thing for us when we look at the impact of both aerospace and defense is this job multiplier. For every job that you see within these 2 specific industries, it creates 2 jobs outside of that. And those jobs could be service related. When we look at hotels, for example, when you bring in outside customers into the area, it could be restaurants, but it is a pretty strong job multiplier. Go on to the next slide. And then as far as our performance, when we look at just the sheer number of concentration, we're very fortunate in Macomb County that we've got the Detroit Arsenal. The Detroit Arsenal is a division of the U.S. Army, various offices within that Army, but really looking at ground vehicle research. And the history of our relationship with the Department of Defense really goes back to pre-World War II. And in fact, when you look at that handshake between automotive and defense, it has been a consistent relationship for many years, especially during maybe perhaps if we go back to the recession, what we saw with our automotive when those jobs were shrinking and plants were shutting down or idling, a lot of those individuals took jobs within the Department of Defense. And then we see the pendulum swing a little bit, where now the Army is saying, okay, well, in industry, they're actually paying more, and we got to be very competitive in order for us to get that workforce. But you see this consistent, like with this chart, this consistent growth, a number of defense contracts that are coming into the area. These defense contracts, ultimately lead to jobs and economic prosperity. Go on to the next slide. All right, so I've got a phenomenal team back in the office that loves to work with data. We do have our GIS systems. We wanted to see, just kind of as a historical, how well has Macomb County been doing in this defense space? We know the numbers speak for it. We see the defense contracts come in. We see the job postings for those jobs. When we look at just that 10-year span, this going from 2010 to 2020, over $25 billion in contracts came to just Macomb County. And what we're able to do with that data is actually map it out to see, where do we see those clusters? In the county, we've identified one cluster, we call it our defense corridor, that goes from 696 all the way up to Hull Road. But we've also now see this other cluster coming in, which actually goes from the south and then a little bit northeast towards Selfridge. And so when we look at rebranding our corridor, there is a huge phenomenal opportunity for us to do this. You'll hear a little bit from Jeff on the aerospace side, but we also have this major aerospace corridor where, organically these businesses have chosen to be located next to each other. And we love that, but we also know that there's a lot of job stealing, individuals leaving one company, going to the company next door. And it all comes down to benefits and who's paying the best. Go on to the next slide. And then one of the other things we did here, and it really comes down to our relationships with our congressional delegation, being able to take this data and really focus on districts, whether it is our state or federal representatives, really letting them know there's an economic impact here to our state. When we look at ourselves and compare ourselves to other states, for example, California or Texas, our numbers are far less. And so we definitely have opportunity to bring in more additional contract type of work. Maybe perhaps it's not just that manufacturing component, but really focusing in on technology and where we're headed in this space. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing with the advancements of technology and Industry 4.0 from our footprint. Macomb County is very ripe and prime for these types of jobs. Go on to the next slide. All right, so Industry 4.0. I know many on this call are very familiar with this terminology. A little history on just the term Industry 4.0. It was actually coined in Germany. They actually released it at one of their major automation and robotics show called Hannover Messe, which we've attended in the past. But that was back in 2011. So going back to let's look at the past 10 years. And it really is important for us to see just how that transformation has really changed the way businesses do business. From our perspective in the county, we really see this as, what do the next 10 years look like? And so when you hear terms such as power mobility, electrification, cyber engineering, all of that really plays into how do our businesses adapt to the new technology that's coming their way. And it's very disruptive. What we see in automotive, they've made huge strides in this space, but I'll tell you, in the defense space, it is equally a goal and priority for them. So when we talk about getting back to that synergy between these two major industries, a lot is happening, and it's also happening in tandem. And from my perspective, I would love to see more collaboration. So, I know we've got a lot of automotive individuals on the call today, but there definitely is an opportunity to get more involved in that defense industry. We have an effort, part of our Macomb Next campaign. This was actually a grant that we received through the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, to really promote and create awareness of what is Industry 4.0. We have about 16,000 businesses in the county that really could take that next step, that giant leap into the technologies. And if you go on to the next slide, I'll talk about the specific pillars we've identified within the Industry 4.0 sector. We know this does not just impact our manufacturers. We're seeing Industry 4.0 really get infused within our restaurants, our retail industry, even our farms, where they're adding in robotic applications for planting and seeding. So it's pretty cool to see this all happen, but we definitely see ourselves as a catalyst, helping these businesses take that giant leap. When we look at the 9 pillars that you see in front of you, a lot of these are very familiar to many of you. Cybersecurity, advanced robotics and automation. A little caveat there, when you look at Industry 3.0 was actually the introduction of the robots. 4.0 is the robot, but you add software, you add digitization, different technologies to really advance what that robot is doing. Our robots are now talking to each other. And so we're seeing that on our shop floors, which is very exciting. But I want to tie this back to why is this also important to the Department of Defense and what we're seeing here locally. When you talk to the folks over there, they have 5 specific goals and priorities for their field of studies. And I want to call them out because you'll actually see them on this slide. So one of their goals is the advancements of robotics and autonomy. Whenever you can take a soldier out of the mix and maybe perhaps add that element of technology, absolutely, it's going to be important for the Department of Defense. A lot of the technology that's already on our shop floors, actually, there's a dual purpose, and that can be brought into the Department of Defense. Another area is modeling and simulation. Maybe perhaps it isn't actually building that prototype or testing out that prototype, but you're able to do that in a software platform. Vehicle electrification. And this is huge. I think it's across the board. I don't think I go a day without that word popping up in my world, and really looking at, how this is going to dynamically change the way we live, work, play, the way we drive, the way we get around. From a planning perspective, I do wear another hat, is where are we going to put all these chargers? Where's the right place for those charging units to go? And making sure zoning and ordinance allow for that in a community. And then if you look at advanced manufacturing, which is one of their 4th goals and priorities, absolutely falls within this Industry 4.0 pillar. And then the last one is cyber engineering. As Matt mentioned, I oversee a group called MadCat. And MadCat really was a grassroots effort that we created in 2014, working really in close collaboration with WIN on this one, where there really wasn't any major programming, or there was just all these schools and universities were throwing out different trainings and certifications, and there was no standardization of that. And through MadCat, we were able to, not only bridge the gap between the universities and what businesses needed to see, but also really start planting that seed with our K through 12. Talking to students about jobs in cybersecurity. I bring this up because this is probably one of the hottest careers out there, and the greatest need is in that cyber engineering space. We're seeing it not only in industry, but also within the Department of Defense, where once again, these are great paying jobs, but finding that skill set has definitely been a little bit of a challenge in this space. And so I believe this is my final slide. Oh, actually, I have one more. Okay, really what it comes down to is partnerships. When we stood up the Macomb Next effort, we realized that this is not just a planning and economic development effort, that we really needed to have the conversations with many partners on what they're doing in this space. And so we pulled together, we call it ourselves the Tiger Team. If you're familiar with that terminology, it is a DoD team, our DoD term, but it really is your think tank. Each one of these organizations that became part of our Tiger Team really bring an element to the conversation on here's what's happening in Industry 4.0 and how do we all work collaboratively together so that we can continue to enhance it. And ultimately, kind of what's at the center of that is, are our businesses getting the help and the support that they need? Whether it's on that workforce side, whether it's understanding, is their business ready to bring on some of this technology, whether it's robots or 3D printers, and how these organizations can all come together, kind of wrap our arms around our small businesses who are really intimidated by this space, and rightfully so, because it's so disruptive. But it does take a team. So, I did want to give a shout out to our Tiger team. And then I think after this may be my last slide. So I will turn it back to you, Matt. I think we said we're going to wait for questions to the end, unless there's anything that came through on the chat.
Oh yeah, there are a few, but let's do those at the end if we can, Vicki. That was a great presentation, and it just underscores to me, your position as someone, putting together collaborations, connecting the dots, because we're really going to need this collective impact. There's a whole science around complexity science, and we're having to deal with that in the 21st century, and it is disruptive. But using data, as you say, Vicki, can really accelerate our path to progress. And so you modeled that perfectly in that first presentation. And of course, the details around those kinds of collective impact activities matter. So we'll get to some of those questions at the end. So next, I want to turn to Andy, because everyone's at a different platform. We've got economic development leaders that need to be integrated with technology leaders. So let me turn it to you, Andy, for your presentation.
I think you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you, sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you very much. Vicki, a very good presentation. What you'll hear from me is kind of some supportive evidence of what Vicki was talking about with regards to the Department of Defense. I'm going to do this in a couple of ways. First, I'm going to discuss NAMC, primarily because of the ecosystem that's been created with NAMC, with industry, and the types of technologies that are being investigated and developed through the program. And then I'll look at the industry, the government, the customer, what they see, and it's very supportive of what Vicki just said, the 5 areas, but try to provide evidence of where they're supporting those topics, what programs they have had or are having, and how they're moving forward with that. So let's start with NAMC. Next slide. So NAMC has been in existence since 2008. We started out of the DoD as the Robotic Technology Consortium, and later, around 2014, moved over to the Detroit Arsenal from DoD to expand our scope and focus on mobility. And since then, since the period of 2008, we've obligated more than $900 million in research and development funds, which is quite substantive. I was talking to somebody the other day. If you're a large OEM, it's probably a drop in the bucket for you all. But for the R&D community, $900 million is pretty impressive. That is a lot of money, and it funds a lot of research. We've had over 400 projects in mobility, robotics, et cetera, and I'll go into more detail on that in a second. We have over 500 members, as I said. 66% of those are non-traditional defense contractors. So those are your startups, your people who have never worked with the DoD before, but the DoD wants to attract into their cycle so that they can get the best and brightest minds and most current thoughts in their programs. So it's a very strong collaborative. We call it an ecosystem. The thing that really separates typical consortium, us from typical consortiums, are what you see on the right. We have different programs in the area of innovation, collaboration, and education. The government turns to us to do and lead some extremely exciting, innovative projects, and we actually are the prime contractor on those. And then we bring our membership in as subs. We do things such as the new open standard architectures. We look at things such as the robotic operating system, which is a standard for developing robots in the commercial industry. We took that standard, which we knew very well, and we're creating a militarized version of that. So these types of things, we are asked with our expertise, myself and other participants, consultants that we have, and our experience, to project into the future, what do we need to be the most effective military on the planet. And they turn to us to do that. So it gives us a really good insight into and understanding of where the Army is moving in modernization. Collaboration, as I said, we do a lot of teaming with our collaborating, having our members collaborate together, as well as we collaborate with other consortiums on special needs. We had an emerging, we call it an emerging needs statement come out of the DoD just a month ago, a very challenging problem, and we collaborated with another consortium to respond to that so that we could give the DoD some of the best ideas that that could be garnered. So those are the types of things we do. Let's go to the next slide. If you look at our membership, there are three primary areas that our members fall. But if you think of buckets, three different buckets our members fall in. There's the vehicle and platform enabling technologies. You know, those are things you might expect. Any technologies required to build that platform and to put it out into the field. Another very important element for the DoD is the human-machine interface, because we need to collaborate as we move further down the line with autonomy. You may have fully autonomous squads operating in the field. Now, somewhere in the loop, a human is involved, whether it's back at headquarters or maybe even closer. And these humans, when they do interact with these robots or work with these robots, need to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So human-machine interface technology is extremely important and extremely difficult. You may hear, and it's become more popular, you know, years and years ago, we're working on these concepts, but they're more mainstream now, you know, things like cognitive load. One of the important things with autonomy and unmanned platforms, whether it's commercial or DoD, is how do we lighten that cognitive load of the human? So lightening the cognitive load of a driver driving their commercial vehicle is really the goal of autonomy. Anywhere, if you took Toyota approach, they want the human still driving the car, and the autonomy helps them drive more effectively, whereas others are trying to just remove the human altogether. But somewhere that is totally removing cognitive load. So HMI is extremely important. And then the third area is the system integration, and being able to integrate these technologies together and do it effectively. Next slide. I don't need to go into this one. Let's go to the next slide. And then next slide again. These are just how we execute projects. I wanted to get to this. The notable projects that we have at AMCC, to give you an appreciation of some of the things we're doing. As the Army moves forward into their modernization programs, they have a number of key programs, and many of them are being executed through NAMC. You'll see SMET, Squad Multi-Purpose Equipment Transport. You'll see the Robotic Combat Vehicle, RCV, two extremely important programs in the Army's modernization. You'll see the Common Robotic System, both individual and heavy on the robotics side. PACBOT, which is also on the robotics side, used for things like IED detonation, for search and surveillance, etc. So we are involved, and these are just a sampling of very, very key programs in the Army. We have a deep understanding of these programs, deep understanding of the technologies required and the challenges associated with the technologies. And then there's also those strategic initiatives, those innovative projects I mentioned. MOSA is the Modular Open Systems Approach. CMO is the Common Modular Open Architectures. So those are, in the past, the military, one of the issues they faced was that often they would go to a large prime, OEM, you know, you can pick your favorite. And when they contracted to them, they were pretty much tied to whatever that contractor, that OEM did for them. They didn't have as much, they were tied to them. And so they felt very confined as to bringing in new technologies, understanding the architecture and having general industry understand the architecture that these OEMs have been building and being able to integrate into. So the Army, actually the DoD is moving very strongly into these open system architectures, where you would have an open system and you bring your technology in, very similar to the commercial industry plug and play. You just come in with an appropriate interface, plug your technology in their architecture, and you're off and running. So those are really important, and we're key into helping them investigate those programs or those architectures, et cetera. I've mentioned ROS-M, and there's all of those on the strategic initiatives. Hopefully you get an appreciation of the importance of those types of initiatives. Next slide. So with that, I want to now switch. So hopefully you get an understanding of, as a consortium, the value of the ecosystem, the knowledge that we're gained, call it corporate memory across the whole ecosystem, and how we're able to leverage that and hopefully provide the Army value as they seek and maintain their position as the greatest fighting force in the world. So now I want to go into a little bit. Here's what, as I interface with my customer, both all the way from director all the way down, the types of things that they're interested in. And Vicki very appropriately hit these head on. I do not have cyber on here, but electrification, robots and autonomy, modeling, simulation, and advanced manufacturing. And I'll give you a little sample of each one, as well as the challenges. This is where Michigan needs to move. We need to be the leader in this. We are in a tough fight. Do not make it known. Don't think that just because we have the automotive industry here, you know, this is a home run for us. We're in a deep, deep competitive fight, obviously not only with California, with Pittsburgh, with Austin, Texas, and we can't rest on our laurels. We really got to get strong in this. And as all of you are mentioning and probably focusing on, workforce is extremely important. It is extremely hard to maintain our workforce in this state. They still are leaving in droves when they graduate from these universities. My son just left. He got his PhD in Michigan and went out to California. It is hard. It's hard to match their salaries. They're even more insane than what you probably have heard in the press, having had my son go through it. So we have to figure out ways we can attract that talent. In the areas of electrification, you know, hybrid tactical vehicles are really important to the DoD, as they are for commercial industry. They want to try to move, they'll introduce their first tactical vehicles, they hope, in 2035, and have some fully electric vehicles by 2050. The robots and autonomy, AI is important is an important area for autonomy, as is the modular mission payloads. We have had a good position in AI here in this state, you know, primarily through the University of Michigan, but we're losing it. You know, it was at one time wide open. Nobody could claim that they were the leader in AI, but things are starting to now stratify, and you're starting to see certain centers in the country really claim that position. And make it known, I do not consider machine learning AI, so take that off the equation. AI is really the reasoning, the decision making, you know, the cognitive aspects to executing and having some platform be able to execute a task. Modeling and simulation, Vicki did a good job with this, with the digitization. You know, we're talking digital twins. How do we represent a full vehicle digitally? And then from that, we can start doing the testing and evaluation. You've heard the stories about Waymo. It takes billions and billions of miles to be able to certify a behavior in the vehicle. You can't do that by driving on the street. So what do? You use effective simulation to do that. So that's a very important area, and it's true with the military as well. And advanced manufacturing. How can we cut the costs and start 3D printing facilities? And you've probably heard the Arsenal is standing up a large 3D printing facility this year. So a little bit more. I'm going to go, hopefully I'll try to go faster, but I get excited about this stuff. Next slide. On electrification, the big vehicle, there's two vehicles they're looking at, the electric light reconnaissance vehicle, which the solicitation will be coming out, we anticipate any time now, probably early next, probably in the fall, as well as a joint tactical light vehicle. The issues there, of course, are the energy density. We've known that's the big problem. We've got to solve that. Charging stations that Vicki mentioned, safety is an incredibly difficult problem. There are a lot of fires with electric vehicles. Protecting them on the battlefield from catastrophic events are really hard. The government, for the most part, at this point in time, though they're investing, they're turning to commercial industry for their battery design. I used to know the executive VP at GM back in the early days, who was running their battery program, their electrification program, and that was back in the 80s. So I know GM has been doing this for many, many, many decades, and they're way ahead, as well as other automotive industry companies. So rightfully so, the DoD is looking to them to help bring in their technology into their designs. Next. Next slide. Thank you. Robotics and Autonomy is probably one of the more active programs. It started with a DARPA Grand Challenge. I'm sure all of you know about that. And now the Army is moving forward at a fairly crisp pace to bring autonomy into the battlefield. We've got a number of programs, Robotic Combat Vehicle, RCV. We've got Leader Follower that's been primarily when it first was started. Imagine you had a human-driven truck in the lead, and then 3 or 4 trucks in a convoy following it that were autonomously and just kind of picking up their cues from that human truck ahead of it. Obstacle avoidance, digital mapping, robotics and autonomous systems, for the ground. Racer, a big DARPA program that is investigating, can we have vehicles drive at the speed, autonomous vehicles drive in open terrain at the speeds of a tank, 40 kilometers per hour at minimum. So those are challenging programs. The issues, the maturity of the AI, we're still really at an infant state with regards to AI. We have a long way to go. Machine learning, I'll introduce it here. The size and brittleness of the training sets, you've heard about that. The edge cases, which are those new cases that emerge with every test, and there are new edge cases every single time we drive that we've never seen before, and we have to develop a new behavior for each one of those. That's why it's taken the commercial industry so long to field an effective autonomous vehicle. These edge cases are incredibly large. There's a number of enablers that the government's working on. The robotic technology kernel is that core technology for the autonomy. I already mentioned modular open systems architecture. Next slide are more enablers. So that gives you an idea. Let me go on to the next slide so I can speed this up. Modeling simulation, Vicki did a great job introducing this. Very, very important. You're seeing more of the designs in the Army going to that digital twin. We're seeing it with a new optionally manned fighting vehicle, which is calling for a digital twin. The optionally manned tank, which is a new program out of the Army, also is digitizing their tank. So we're seeing more and more programs requesting industry to provide a digital twin of their design. The issues, there are many technical issues, the fidelity between the models, the physics-based, behavioral environmental models. They're all different. They're all different types. We got to integrate all those together, and that's a big challenge. There's many enablers. We've had game-based approaches to modeling. The Army developed one called Anvil. We've got game-based simulation and experimentation using Unreal, Unity, game engines. Large other experimentation sims like OneSAF and computer-aided design. Next one. And I think that was it. So that hopefully gives you a sense. I'm a technologist. You probably heard from my bio. I love technology. I tend to like to be 20 years ahead of everyone on the technology. So That's what gets me going in the morning, and hopefully that helps you think through, maybe not as much today, but in the future where we need to be.
Oh, it's excellent, Andy. Very well received, and it's a good way to make a transition, right? So we have to see where we're going to be way in the future, and then backcast and say, all right, how are we going to get there, right? And so there's been a lot of movement toward strengthening this cluster-based initiative that Vicky talked about, and we can't do it in just one region or another. We have to do it in every key region where we have capabilities. Vicky's reference to location quotients gets at a lot of these federal designation programs that I referred to in my introduction, right? So that's going to America's strength in all of those areas, all the big 6 areas that were referred to, starting with workforce, but all the way through to innovation, research, operational improvement, capital access, many others. And yeah, it's complex, but for listeners on here, whatever silo that you occupy, you're somewhere in that ecosystem. Don't be intimidated by the scope of the challenge. It's also the scope of the opportunity is huge. And so to hear more about that from his perch, let's turn it to Jeff.
Good morning. This is a perfect segue, these 2 presentations in advance of this one. So my name is Jeff Simek. I'm a board member of the Michigan's aerospace industry. And if I were to say we were doing one thing, it's essentially working to connect every aerospace company across the state of Michigan to build a brand. And as Vicky alluded to a bit back from World War II era, I mean, we've been essentially, the aerospace has never left here. It's just been shadowed by other dominant industries such as automotive, and even today financial services is big for the state of Michigan. So anyways, we can move on to the next slide. So today across the entire globe in aerospace is a diversification it's a global diversification. So it doesn't matter what happens here in the state of Michigan relative to its economy or even in the nation, there's always people, always growth in aerospace around the world. So this just gives you an idea of the value of the aerospace industry on an annual basis. And it shows that today, even roughly 50% of aerospace manufacturing and services, it happens in the United States. And then there's some other, obviously the other half is outside. What's happening, so this is broken up into aircraft engines and OEMs, aircraft system component manufacturing, civil and military maintenance, repair, and overhaul, satellites in space, missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, and then others. So when we look at the aerospace industry, that's what we're looking at. So we can move on to the next slide. Michigan has a huge amount of aerospace going on. We have every part of the ecosystem happening here in the state of Michigan. There's over 1,000 companies tied to aerospace here. In Michigan is arguably the largest cluster of both aerospace, automotive and aerospace tooling in the nation, if not the world. So one of the things to highlight in here is that we put things together here in Michigan. And all the tooling and automation companies that happen to have headquarters here in for both automotive and aerospace. And a lot of those automation and tooling companies are doing both aero and auto. But this is just a listing of all the items that we have captured in our database for things that happen in the aerospace ecosystem in terms of making aircraft. Next slide. This is another interesting slide, AS9100. That is the certification required to be an aerospace tier 1. IATF 19649 is a certification is required for automotive, to be an automotive tier 1. You know, both of these are ISO based, and a lot of our companies in Michigan are ISO 9000. So one of the things, Michigan's combined IATF and AS9100 certified companies is arguably the largest concentration in the world. So we've been, as a result of the auto industry, we have been aligned to regulation and certification for 100 years. So all of our companies are experienced in this. This is a heat map of the AS9100 companies in the state of Michigan. And in 2019, there were 225 companies, and in 2022, there are now 283. So there's been a growth of companies, 25% in the last 4 years, that have went and obtained their AS9100 certification. So you can tell companies are wanting to diversify. I'm one of those, or RCO Aerospace and RCO Engineering is one of those companies. We happened to do that back in 2010. So this just gives you an idea that companies are starting to look beyond automotive. Next slide. This is basically what's happening in Michigan in terms of revenue. So Michigan is roughly a $500 billion state. There's $6.4 billion study that was done here today. This was back in just prior to COVID. And these are the largest companies here in the state. So we have Arconic, GE Aviation, Eaton Aerospace, Cleta Air, which is a large MRO up north. We have Pratt Whitney making fan blades for engines and engine components here in Lansing, Michigan. Parker Aerospace, Williams International. So these are some of the major players involved. And it's continuing. We believe it's much larger than 6.4 billion when you start pulling in a lot of the auto companies that are also doing aero, the tier ones and tier twos. But we're just not able to grab that specific data at this stage. It's probably well over 8 billion though. Next slide. So one of the things that is a disruptor in the aerospace industry is COVID-19. The big driver of revenue is passenger traffic around the world. And so we look at India and China and other growing countries. And the first thing that the folks that live there, they start to make more money. They want to go on a vacation and they buy a ticket. Basically, prior to COVID, the global aircraft traffic or passenger traffic was growing at a pace of 8% year over year. And so that's really what the blue line up top here is representing. And then what happened with COVID is the red line, we dropped obviously back in Q2 of 2020 down to roughly almost zero passenger traffic. And then it started to grow as vaccinations occurred. And it's still on its way back up, but we also have supply side constraints. We're still waiting for more business travel growth to occur. But we believe sometime in 2025 that it will be back to a new normal. And so that is important to recognize because there's a lot of opportunity relative to realignment of the supply chain. And again, this is a global supply chain. And obviously we discussed a bit about what Michigan's made up of. And so there's definitely opportunity for Michigan to step in and become a larger player. We're not necessarily interested in making aircraft here in the state of Michigan. At least the board of directors will tell you that we want to make parts and we want to bring things to market for the aircraft industry. So that's next slide. This is gives you just a little bit on commercial production rates for commercial aircraft. Boeing and Airbus are the duopoly of making these aircraft, and the airlines are out buying them. And this just gives you some ideas of what happened. We were roughly making up near 2,000 aircraft a year between Boeing and Airbus, made up of regional turboprops, wide bodies, narrow bodies. And of course, there's other manufacturers in the mix other than Airbus and Boeing. but these are essential actuals that are occurring. So we dropped down to 829 aircraft, and we're on our way back up. So just that just gives us some real data on production rates at the OEMs for the aircraft. Next slide. So there are 5 megatrends in aerospace going on right now. I think one, the decarbonization and sustainability, essentially what's happening out in space and the commercialization of space. Autonomous systems have always been involved in aerospace, but it's growing as well. And then the digital development that both Andy and Vicky spoke about. And then advanced air mobility, which I think is something that is, Michigan is very poised to grow, considering what's happening in the auto industry with battery density and electrification, which is something advanced air mobility also needs. The autonomy, it's essentially much easier to have an autonomous aircraft than it is an autonomous car, considering we're flying in the air versus, you know, driving on the road with all the different variables. So the auto industry is really pressing forward with the autonomous technologies. And I think autonomous technologies and electrification are a couple of key areas that advanced air mobility needs. And we look at advanced air mobility really just from a broad sense. It's either package or people, civil or military, urban or rural. And where it's going to start is package and rural delivery, where we have drones moving product, critical items to consumers and for humanity and people. Next slide. This is something we shared with the Senate Commerce Committee. Actually, this entire slide deck we did at Lansing. So this is just a thought-provoking slide. You know, advanced air mobility manufacturers, who will win? So one of the things that, if you noticed, Boeing and Airbus combined are making roughly, 2,000 aircraft. Aerospace doesn't know how to scale like the automotive industry does, and we feel drone manufacturing will need to scale to higher volumes. And again, just like I said, with the electrification and battery density and things of that nature, it puts Michigan really in a bright spot with having, as we all know in the news, that there's automotive companies investing in advanced air mobility. So we believe that there's a real opportunity for Michigan, and advanced air mobility will be considered critical infrastructure for the nation. So we have the opportunity to put this forward for the United States versus the Silicon Valley startups. So, and we estimate this market to be, by 2040, a $1 trillion market. So again, looking forward 20 years from now, we do have to start and lay the groundwork so that we can become the supplier. Next slide. This is our board of directors. Again, I'm Jeff Simek with RCO Aerospace. This board of directors is crossed from Jackson, Michigan, all the way up to Calumet and the UP. There's small and medium-sized companies here, and there's obviously big players, including the University of Michigan, which is one of the largest or the longest running aerospace engineering schools in the country. Again, GE Aviation, Woodward, they're making fuel nozzles and high technical components that go in engines. And we have some of probably one of the world's top 3 global aerospace consultants, Kevin Michaels from Aerodynamic Advisory, on our board as well. So all the board members are driving the direction of this industry association. And again, We're working on branding and connecting, and there's a lot of leverage and a lot of reach here with each one of these board members. One thing I like to suggest is that we're out working with a lot of economic development partners, such as Macomb Economic Development. We reach out, we're connected with the Right Place in Grand Rapids, Saginaw Futures, Invest UP, and so we're working together to build and to define our aerospace cluster, and then leverage the board network to continue to identify opportunities for the state. And I think next slide. So this is, we have 130 plus members. So on the outer ring are our board companies. And then we focus on, research and development, concept. All these companies in the center are focused on R&D, concept, product development, manufacturing. One thing I didn't really highlight, aftermarket support. These aircraft are, they're regulated, as you can imagine. And once the aircraft is in service and it's out there for 30 years, the aftermarket revenue to support those aircraft continues to grow. So not only are we developing, making dollars and employing folks to develop products and to manufacture products, we're employing folks to service the aerospace industry for the next 30 years on those aircraft, because they last much longer than cars do. Next slide. And really, we're focused on, networking is a big piece, as I talked about, across the state. We're working with education, and we also have a government affairs committee that is working with the state of Michigan to ensure we're pointing and highlighting opportunity. And I think that's pretty much the last slide here. I did want to share an exciting new event that we have coming up. This is a type of an event that, let's see if I can. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is an executive level thought leader conference that you would typically attend in either locations such as Seattle, Washington, Los Angeles, California, Singapore, Frankfurt, Germany, maybe Montreal. So we're bringing a conference. Aero One is a conference platform that we developed, and we're bringing it here to Michigan, and we're bringing it to Grand Rapids. And so I just wanted to cover a few things here. We're focused, it's a 2-day event. There is topics such as the supply chain outlook, advanced air mobility, and you'll notice some of the names underneath these topics. Joby Aviation, NASA just recently joined. They have a big push where they're defining the supply chain gaps for advanced air mobility, because the federal government believes it's super critical for us to get in front of this. So NASA is working diligently on aligning and determining the gaps. We're going to have some tier ones involved, talking about the challenges in today's market. We're going to actually have Michigan Economic Development Corporation is going to be speaking, or going to be on a panel. We're going to talk about aerospace clusters, opportunities and challenges. NASA just recently decided to join that to define more of Michigan's aerospace cluster that they've discovered. And we'll talk about zero carbon emissions, sub-tier suppliers, and an aero engine outlook. And if you look at some of the speakers involved, we have some of the top-level consultants from around the world coming. Airbus America's vice president, Bank of America. These are the big players that help thought lead the industry globally. We're even going to talk about business jet aviation, again, NASA. Lots of really key folks coming, and I just wanted to share. I think it's very important for any stakeholder in the state of Michigan looking at economic development, looking at where the industries are headed, aerospace is headed relative to new technology. It's a very, very important show, and we're hoping to continue this conference. And we want to put a big showing out there for all these speakers, and we want to highlight the state of Michigan. So I think it's something we should all attend. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think you hit on an important point that all three of our speakers have talked about, is that importance of collaboration. This is not some kind of moonlighting activity. Wherever you sit, whatever silo you are, private enterprises, supplier, workforce development, economic development, wherever you sit, collaboration is key, but we have to do it strategically, right? And I really liked your slide, Jeff, around the megatrends. I thought that was well received, and kind of opens up a question for Vicki about megatrends. One of those megatrends is around digitization, and we have a great strength in Michigan with the historic manufacturing. And yet a lot of our manufacturers are not digitized. Some have called digitization a threshold technology. Without that, we can't get to other applications of new technologies. And so, and no one's got this really dialed anywhere in the country, and so we know that's a challenge. Vicki, speak to that. Like, how in Michigan, for example, do you guys look at that challenge with all of your teammates in Michigan? How are you going to digitize more of the manufacturing sector there in Michigan?
Sure, you got it. It really kind of looks at the root is the workforce and the talent. Who's going to be able to bring that talent into those small businesses, for example. And what we're finding, actually, it's more of a culture thing within, especially if you're a business that's been around generationally. Where it has to come from the top, saying we're going to invest in this technology, we're going to purchase it, but someone's got to figure it out for us. And it's either going to be somebody who's already on staff that you've got to upskill and train, or it's bringing in that talent saying, okay, we've got big ideas, but how do we get there? And it definitely becomes kind of like what comes first, the horse or the cart. What we're finding, that especially with our small businesses, they're loving the connection back to our high school students, our college graduates, because they already come with a comfort level of the technology. They're okay with technology. It really is looking at the generations two above that, saying, okay, just be comfortable with us bringing in software or any type of new equipment where maybe perhaps it is more autonomous. But it is the culture at the top.
Yeah, thank you for that. It makes me, I think it's a problem across the country, right? So how do we accelerate the pace of progress? I mean, there's a lot of progress in manufacturing, and we're making directional progress on many of those mega trends. It's the speed at which we're lacking, and so. So I think this convening and convenings like it that each of the three of you have described are important to accelerate that progress. Andy, I want to turn a question to you. You were talking about some key technologies in defense, and you spoke about dual use products and open source architecture. And so there's a question about is that linked, right? So of course, we talked about in the link I put in, the big six key parts of the manufacturing ecosystem, and 6 critical industries for America's strength, including defense and transportation. In the work that you were describing and talking about dual use, was that a question about dual use for defense and kind of civil transportation? So speak to that, because that's a synergy that many around the country see, and so I was wondering on that front. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can spend hours on this topic. What the thing that's I often, let me lead by this, saying this. If there's one thing our federal government does extremely well, it's research and development. And if you look through time, at especially nascent industries that now become full-fledged new markets, whether it's of course, the most prevalent one is the internet, but whether it's commercial aerospace, primarily NASA and spaceships, and the DoD has been the major initiator of those technologies. It's just amazing when companies that you might pull off, Oracle, Cisco's, I mean, you could just name thousands of these companies. So this dual use, those who understand how to take these research projects that DARPA and other DoD have funded and do something with them. And that's what, the Bay Area has learned to do, as well as Cambridge, Boston area, to do so well. They are very well supported by federal funding. And then it's how do you take those results from that federal funding and implement it and scale it out to a commercial industry. So those results are going into the DoD, but they're also going into commercial industry. So that's from DoD to commercial, but it's even more valuable for commercial to come back into DoD, because when they start working at the scales commercial autos works at, and they're able to further develop it, mature it, it gets even stronger, the technology. So our products for DoD get better. So it's the cycle, feed forward and feed back. So it is extremely important.
And it's exciting, yeah. Exciting. And you're getting at the point, and Michigan has an incredible amount of research, capabilities in its educational institutions already. So when you look at these location quotients, right, if you throw in the research component, Michigan is well poised to be one of these leading regions. So yeah, it's an excellent point, and thank you for illuminating that, because I think, for listeners on here and their colleagues, whatever perch you occupy, kind of seeing where Michigan can be, in a few years, and then backcasting on, well, how can you add value to that journey, I think is one of those important things. And there's great success, Jeff. I was taken by your reflection of the aerospace supplier growth in just 4 years, 25%. Can you speak to that? Like, how did that happen? And how can that be applied, in these other contexts? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I like to say that the state of Michigan did, Pure Michigan Business Connect had a handful of things cooking relative to aerospace. We did a couple summits. And the Aerospace Industry Association in Michigan, we started up in 2017. About the same time, Michigan was really focused on aerospace to some degree at the Pure Michigan Business Connect. And, a lot of companies came forward to those events to understand what was going on with aerospace. And we were there. And a lot of the companies that did join, I'll pat on the back for us. We helped them along, and we explained to them what it would take to go get AS 9100. And, the big thing with working with OEMs in the aerospace industry, you have to have that certification if you're going to supply to them. If you're a tier 2 supplying to a tier 1, it's really up to the tier 1. If you're actually certified in AS 9100, certainly you would be an ISO 9000 company. But opportunities really started to surface, and so more companies have taken the challenge. And then on the other side of it, if you take a look at Pratt Whitney they actually had this fan blade, carbon titanium fan blade manufacturing business. It was outside the country. And part of the deal was they wanted to bring it inside. And where best to do it, they discovered Michigan. And really, I think it's driven because of our process. We're so process oriented in scale and volume. And, so that was, those types of things. There's companies moving or that have moved into Michigan because to take advantage of our manufacturing skill set. So I think it's a culmination of a handful of things, but I think the automotive industry and what's happening in the disruption of the electric vehicle, and it's real. If you start looking at the components that are required for an ICE engine, and those components that are, no longer going to be manufactured, fuel lines, transmission components, and all this. I mean, just so many things, exhaust pipes, that companies actually manufacture here. They're looking to shift, and they're, making decisions to do that.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I mean, it's impressive, and it takes an approach that looks at the entire ecosystem, all parts of it. And we've got a couple of questions that are coming in on one part of it. The critical part that you've all talked about is workforce, and so what can you say, Vicki, about the the crossover on workforce issues in the aerospace and defense industries?
Sure. Number one, like you guys have heard the term, the Great Resignation. It is active and alive. One of the conversations we have with our businesses always comes up in the very beginning is trying to find the workforce. In fact, I don't want to steal Jeff's thunder, but they have a really great marketing pitch to how they're hosting their job fair this next weekend. But Jeff, I'll let you talk about that. But our businesses have to do something very different. They can no longer just post it online in hopes that the workforce will come and apply for those jobs. When COVID happened, a lot of our workers had to shift to this remote work environment. We're finding is that employees are humans. They want to find that work-life balance, and they want their employer to respect that. And so a lot of our employers are hearing them out. They're saying, well, maybe perhaps we will look at this hybrid environment so that maybe perhaps, it's quality of life, bringing back tuition reimbursement, hiring bonuses, even creating opportunities for daycare. All of these little elements really help draw in that workforce. But then it also comes down to the culture of the company. Is the culture of the company, innovative? Are they out there, seeking that fun work environment, getting back to the human element that we are just people. We want to come into work. We want to love what we do. So that workforce component is really important. When it comes to the breakdown of the workforce for automotive, aerospace, and even in defense, they all speak very different languages. When we talk about acronym soup, each one of these industries is so very different. But I think what we have here in Michigan is so unique in that many of our engineers, for example, who worked for the automotive industry and then took jobs within the defense industry and are now realizing they want to be in aerospace, they're multilingual. They understand not just the acronyms, the speed of production, the production life cycle. That is a very unique characteristic. And those are the type of individuals that we want to keep here in the state.
Yeah, we're talking about, not just doing anything to improve the workforce, but having strategic collaboration to improve the workforce. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we're having as a nation. So in Washington, D.C., there's been lots of meetings, in the last decade with a lot of the federal agencies and around what can we do to really strengthen the manufacturing ecosystem across the country. So it's not a race to the bottom of one region competing against each other, but that they're complementary. So we come together as a nation with a strong manufacturing ecosystem, and it's challenging, and each state has to step up. There's a question that came in around, shouldn't there be a strategic assessment by the state to execute on some of these outcomes that we want to produce. And so I think every region's got to look at that. I think every state's got to look at that, and we have a lot of talent. Just bringing it together in a strategic fashion, I think, is the point. A lot of compliments coming in about this kind of strategic collaboration, so those are well received, but it can't be a one-off. And I think the series of these convenings is one aspect of doing it, but trying to repeat it over and over again for stakeholders wherever they sit in a kind of a evidence-based frame is the work that we're all working on. And to the suppliers out there, a point was well received about how private companies competing don't have a lot of time for these strategic collaborations. And so that's a challenge we have to address. We have to work constantly, as our three distinguished speakers have reflected in this convening. So let's see. There's some more comments coming in. Let's see. I think job hopping is a thing. I mean, Jeff, in your world, our aerospace, suppliers, how are they adapting to kind of the overall trend of job hopping? I mean, it's a challenge to train up folks, but that's part of the reality, right? And so what are you seeing in that growth? Obviously, the aerospace suppliers have figured that out in some ways. What can you share with listeners about that?
Well, I think some of the aerospace, the new technologies, other competing industries. So when we look at advanced air mobility again, or space, those are things where aerospace is enjoying folks coming into the aerospace industry wanting to work. However, obviously, there's been a lot of layoff activity relative to COVID, and the output isn't what it is. It's not back to normal yet. So we do see folks leaving the aerospace industry as well. I think I don't have a really good answer on job hopping. We're just focused at RCO with creating a noble mission, creating a career path for folks. And those are a couple items. We, really focused on the employee experience more so than we have in the past. And Vicki was mentioning this job fair we're doing. We have several openings here. For every one job opening in North America, there's a half person to fill it. So, and the participation rate, as it was alluded to, is not where it was pre-COVID. It probably never will get there with the great retirement. But, so it's a bit of a talent war. We have to get out there, but, we're, the whole country, the reality is we're losing some level of productivity, but, it's tied to supply chains and things of that nature too. So we're just focused on, the employee experience and making sure that we're in front of opportunity so they are.
Yeah, it is a challenge, but we're up to the challenge. And I think what I've heard today in Michigan are good examples of that kind of strategic collaboration that's going to help us, as a nation, rise to the challenge. We need Michigan's innovation across the country, really, and that's the way that we're going to be able to compete as a nation. And so I want to thank all of our speakers, Vicki, Andy, and Jeff, for outstanding presentations. And with that, I want to turn it back to Amanda.
Hello. It looks like we have one more question in the chat, and we still have a few minutes. If you guys would be happy to answer that question.
Sure.
It is from Dennis. What is the Aerospace Consortium doing to drive the energy agenda in Michigan such that you have the energy required I don't know how to say that correctly, 7 by 24 by 365, 24/7.
Okay, so I'm assuming this is coming to the Aerospace Industry Association. We're not is tied in with the infrastructure relative to, the need of the technology. I know that we're working with the state, and the state's working on a lot of that activity. So I can't really answer that question professionally.
Any other comments?
I think it's a great question. Like Dennis, I want you to keep asking it because I think there needs to be an answer. I don't know if you've got those individuals on the call today, but it's definitely a thought-provoking question.
Well, that wraps us up for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. It's been a great conversation and great panel of speakers, and we look forward to seeing you at the next MAGMA Advisory Council.
Great.
You guys get about 30 minutes back in your day.
Thanks, so.
Great, thank you.
Perfect.
Well,